For years, it's been fair to say that the Masters of the Universe as a movie concept has been extremely tough to crack. Gary Goddard's under-budgeted but well-intentioned 1987 movie from Canon was meant to revitalize the popularity of the waning brand, but instead doomed it. Although it's fondly remembered by much of the fandom today, myself included, it was obliterated by critics at the time and made a pittance at the box office. Motu went from being the hottest boys brand on the planet to being box office poison, and even worse, yesterday's news. Fast forward to 35 years later, and there have been several reversionings and revivals of Motu, all aimed at recapturing the original magic that the brand possessed in its heyday, all while trying to capture the elusive next generation of children everywhere. However, it can be argued that there's still an incredibly uncertain road ahead for Motu, as the long-festering movie at Netflix was abandoned after $30 million in development costs. But the question must be asked, with Mattel currently basking in the glow of incredible reviews and record-breaking box office for Barbie, how is it that Motu has once again missed the boat? Hi there, Jared here, and I welcome you to Fanboys Forever, the channel that's dedicated to all things Motu and all things fandom. In today's discussion video, I'll share my own personal thoughts about what it will take to successfully bring Masters of the Universe to the screen, and what lessons that Mattel and Hollywood in general should be learning from Barbie's success, and how those lessons can and should be applied to Motu. But before we begin, be sure to subscribe, like the video, and enjoy as we look at the 10 keys to bringing the Masters of the Universe movie to life. Number 10. Art design. I start the list with what I believe to be one of the very most important tenets of this entire process, and that's making sure that the concept and art design from the film reflects the outrageous colors, the incredible barbaric designs, and the awesome masculine glory of Masters of the Universe. I think it's definitely time for the producers of the film to look back at the original artwork from artists like Earl Norem, what their main influences ought to be. Taken with those warm oil paintings and those incredible product posters that used to come from Mattel proper, it's really easy to see the visual appeal of Masters of the Universe. That is a combination of Frank Frazetta with Star Wars and modern superheroes and a little bit of Jack Kirby, all rolled into one. By making sure that the film and its designers stay true to that original artistic vision, you're ensuring several things. Number one, that the movie is aesthetically pleasing. Now that we see films like Across the Spider-Verse that is able to mesh some very dynamic and disparate art styles into one film, we're seeing just how possible it is to push the visual medium. It's also important that they do this for marketing purposes and brand recognition. Throughout this video, you will hear me reference the Barbie movie because I think that its success is something that Masters should learn from. In particular, I think that it's obvious that when anyone sees Margot Robbie as Barbie, that you instantly recognize her as the iconic vision of that character. And with He-Man, they have no choice but to do the very same thing, and to hardly deviate whatsoever from that original core design. It is a little alarming to see in recent years how Mattel continues to try to cover up He-Man's muscles with all sorts of armors, whether it be in the comic or the Netflix CGI series. This is very untrue to the character, and I'm afraid that no one will be able to accept He-Man as He-Man unless he is the big lovable barbarian that we all know him to be. And yes, that includes being super muscular and not being turned into a modern MCU hero, a formula that is seeing increasingly diminishing returns. Truly, the art design is key in making sure that this movie is not only successful, but recognizable to millions of Masters fans all over the world. Number 9. Casting. I once again feel that the Barbie movie is a good place to start when it comes to the types of castings that we should see. If you remember, the original casting of Barbie herself was less than ideal. However, with Margot Robbie announced as the main Barbie, and Ryan Gosling announced as the main Ken, I think that it instantly gave the film a whole lot of positive press, especially because I couldn't find anyone who thought that Margot Robbie wasn't an absolute perfect fit for the character of Barbie. Not only does she look just like the character, but she's quite a famous actress in her own right. Something very similar needs to happen with He-Man. I know that in the past few years, people have been talking about maybe getting a young unknown to play He-Man, and even some people saying that a different actor needs to play Prince Adam and a different actor needs to play He-Man. I'm not even sure that Prince Adam should necessarily be a concept in the movie. I think that He-Man should more or less be the toy character from the original 1980s toy line. Of course, Prince Adam was something that was come up with later for the comics and of course the Filmation series. Either way, there does need to be some star power behind the castings. In recent years, I think that we've seen the recent Hollywood trope of kind of doing these no-name castings or young unknown castings kind of backfire. People really do like star-studded casts, and I'm sure that there is no shortage of a huge generation of folks who would love to be associated with a Masters of the Universe movie because it was such a part of so many young kids' lives growing up, both men and women. Either way, the casting should be dynamic. It should not be necessarily distracting from the characters, but it should definitely be something that is instantly iconic and recognizable. Heck, I would actually be fairly happy to see something like a John Cena casting for He-Man. Why? Because much like Margot Robbie as Barbie, it's exactly the kind of archetype and name casting that everyone would be able to agree on, at least visually, that the character would need. And also, have you seen Peacemaker? I mean, goodness, he's good. Like, really good. Number 8, mythology. I hinted towards this in my last category with the casting when I said that maybe there shouldn't be a Prince Adam. This part may throw some of you all for a loop, but I personally think that sometimes the thing that trips up Masters of the Universe and gets in its own way is an overabundance of mythology. I think since the 2000X revitalization of the series, there's been an attempt to make Masters of the Universe kind of a Lord of the Rings light for younger kids. And I'm not necessarily sure that this is the right approach. As a matter of fact, I think that most of the people who were raised on Masters of the Universe have no idea about any of the mythology. And although it's an incredibly fun and rewarding thing to dive deeper into, I think that the mythology should be present within a film, but mostly just be hinted at and not take center stage, especially when it comes to concepts that were created later on or outside of the toy line that then made their way back into the toys. Things like Prince Adam and other Filmation tropes that kind of exist outside of the toy line would better be served for those renditions. Instead, we need a movie that, much like the Barbie movie, focuses on the spirit of the toys themselves. And the toys' main goal was to capture the absolute power fantasy of being the most powerful man in the universe. And with that goal in mind, all of the complex mythology of Masters should be acknowledged in some way, but it should not be the driving force of the movie. Remember, this film needs to appeal to everyone. Number 7, tone. This may be the trickiest takeaway from the Barbie movie. Lots of people have seen the Barbie movie and have talked about its deconstructionist takes on Barbie, as well as its overall comedic tone, suggesting that perhaps Masters of the Universe adopts something similar. To me, that suggestion is tantamount to looking at a play gimmick that Mattel would have came up with for the Barbie line in the 80s, and then saying, you know what, He-Man should also do this thing because it will work perfectly. Wrong. Instead, men want something very different than what women want from these iconic takes on their characters. And yes, it is okay to say that Masters of the Universe has always been a male-aimed brand. There's nothing wrong with that. And so Masters of the Universe should definitely lean into that male-led fantasy. It should be about strength, it should be about power, it should be about masculinity. These themes can be deconstructed throughout the film in a meaningful and thought-provoking way, but should not be the crux of the presentation of the tone of the film. Masters of the Universe should take itself seriously enough to where it does not break the immersion into the world and does not constantly break the fourth wall. However, there should definitely be some room for levity. Again, I would urge you to go back to thinking about how we always played with Masters of the Universe. It's always about adventure. It's always about fun. Whatever concepts that are lighthearted and fun that can make it into those adventures would be perfectly welcome in a movie as well. But once again, I must stress that the things that work for a Barbie movie will not necessarily work for a Masters movie just because it is 1, a Mattel-owned brand, and 2, a toy. Instead, boys' play patterns have always been very different than those of girls, and the same thing will be true when it comes to what they are looking for in a film. Number 6, originality. As I mentioned earlier in another one of the categories, Masters of the Universe should strive to be something far more than Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings. Instead, what is needed is an original take. And originality is kind of a hard thing with Masters of the Universe. The truth is, I'm not even 100% sure what direction that they should go in when it comes to a story. But I do know that it needs to be something that we have not seen played out a million times before. It should present He-Man with a truly unique challenge, but something that he has to use his muscles, his brains, and especially his heart to solve. I definitely think that there's a lot of untapped potential in those early mini-comics, and perhaps that should be a source of inspiration. I think the last thing that they should do in the film is to try to do a tongue-in-cheek recreation of the same tired filmation tropes that we've seen a million times, whether it be in cliched commercials or comedy one-off skits. I think that it's very important for them to actually find something original for He-Man to do, much like Warner Brothers found for Barbie in her movie. Number 5, audience. The audience and knowing it is absolutely key when you're developing a film. Masters of the Universe has, and probably always will be, mostly aimed as a boys' or men's brand. As I said before, there's absolutely nothing wrong with this. And even though it's not broadly true for every single instance, I would say in the vast majority of cases that yes, Masters has historically been aimed at boys. Much of the same can be said about Barbie, although by no means are Barbie collectors exclusively female. Instead, it's always been open to anyone. But to say that Barbie doesn't have a major presence in girls' culture and the history of girls' play would be absolutely ridiculous. The same can be said for Masters of the Universe and the boys and men who enjoy it today. With that in mind, you have to make sure that several things are aligning to make sure that you are appealing to your audience. Firstly, the action has to be as intense and dramatic as you possibly can make it. There has to be a case made for why He-Man is the most powerful man in the universe in early promotional materials, and it should ooze power, fantasy in every aspect of the movie. Just like there's nothing wrong with Barbie being a power fantasy for girls, there's certainly nothing wrong with Masters of the Universe being a power fantasy for boys. The key word in both of these situations is, of course, fantasy, and being an aspirational one at that. Barbie, seen as a positive role model, a can-do woman who can accomplish anything. He-Man, in the same way, should of course be made to be the same big-hearted role model that he's always been. Extremely powerful, but being wise enough to know when to use that power, and especially how to use that power. It's the thing that separates He-Man from a brute. Instead, He-Man should not only be about the action and the adventure, but also about the incredible virtue that such a character represents. These archetypes are nothing to be afraid of, and instead speak to a large segment of the audience that you will want to bring into the theater for this movie. Number 4, the budget. One of the most alarming trends in modern filmmaking, which may be the fault of the MCU, is the tendency to reshoot most of a movie. Movies lately have been going over budget dramatically as they attempt to fix and reshoot everything in post over the course of 1 to even 2 years sometimes. The Flash is a great example of a movie that shouldn't have cost as much as it did, but instead ballooned out of control with an unstable budget and unbelievable rounds of reshoots happening over and over again. And although I really enjoyed The Flash, I think that it's definitely a cautionary tale. On the other hand, you can look at movies that are more modest in their budgets, and it's amazing to say that this would be considered a modest budget, but it certainly is compared to some of these other films. But even Barbie, which cost around $150 million, definitely was a little more careful with its money than, say, something like a $250 million movie like The Flash. Masters of the Universe also needs to be cautious about its budget and make sure that it isn't this over-bloated, ballooned movie that reshoots everything 6,000 times. It's very important that the creators are given enough lead time to perfect the script and to have everything boarded ahead of time, with the animatic process being a major part of this. Perhaps some of the recent bombs that we've been seeing going off in Hollywood should give the studios pause to make sure that there's more time done in pre-production and planning and more resources allocated to this instead of trying to go back and haphazardly fix everything later after test screenings go wrong. Number 3. Toys and tie-ins. One of the most important things that you can do to make sure that your movie is a success when it comes to a brand like Masters of the Universe is have incredibly appealing tie-in toys and lots of promotions. One of the things that I will compliment Barbie on is that they've done a great job of putting together a very appealing collection of Barbie movie product that not only appeals to children, but also appeals to adult Barbie collectors like my mother. One of my favorite things about this collection was that it wasn't over bloated and overdone, and I think that some movie push toy lines today seem to overdo it in this regard, absolutely saturating the market before they even know if there's a demand. Another toy line that I have to give some props to as being a great way to promote the movie is the Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem toys. Playmates has a winning formula when it comes to the way that they develop their Ninja Turtles toys, and these Mutant Mayhem figures do a great job of accomplishing just that, with the promotional end caps at Walmart being a major hub of investment and promotion for the film. Masters of the Universe should try a similar approach. Instead of doing 8,000 different products, they should really focus on a handful of high-quality, dynamic toys that really do a lot to sell the film. And of course, they should find a way to satiate the adult collector as well. I think finding a good halfway like the Barbie toys did is a really good solution in this regard. Number 2, vision. Something that the Barbie movie absolutely has going for it is that Greta Gerwig, the director, had an absolutely integral vision of what she wanted this movie to be. Not only did she direct the film, but she also wrote it. Greta is kind of a needle in a haystack when it comes to Hollywood talent. She has of course done smaller productions and has been critically lauded for those, but clearly she had a very specific idea in mind of what exactly a Barbie movie should be and what topics and themes that it should tackle. In order for Masters of the Universe to be successful, it's going to have the same thing. There will have to be a visionary filmmaker who must step up to the plate and prove themselves that they not only can make a great film full of invested character moments as well as tremendous action, but also have a unique perspective and take on Masters of the Universe that's going to make this movie a special event for the generations of people who will be interested in seeing it. Without a proper vision for the movie to exist, then I'm afraid there's no good reason to make a Masters of the Universe movie. To me, this is the most important lesson that one can possibly learn from the Barbie movie. As long as you have a good reason for a movie to exist, chances are your movie will find an audience. And that is exactly what I think Masters of the Universe needs. And finally, the number one thing that I think that this movie needs to be successful is that it must be an unabashed celebration of everything that makes Masters of the Universe the greatest boys' toy line of all time. Much like the Barbie promotion has been selling Barbie as a celebration of the toys and the concept that girls have absolutely grown up on for 60-some years, then Masters of the Universe must do the same thing in not only the way that the movie is sold, but in the way that the movie is executed. The writers, producers, and director must come up with a concept and an approach to Masters of the Universe that is unashamedly celebratory of everything that makes Masters of the Universe what it is. There has to be high technology. There has to be insane evil villains. Evil snake men, evil horde, evil warriors, virtuous heroes. Masters of the Universe should be completely and utterly unashamed of its bright colors, its incredible weapons, and its fierce devotion to morality and doing the right thing no matter what. It should also be completely unafraid to recapture the epic standoffs that we all have completed using our toys. Whether we were defending our Castle Grayskulls or sailing our Wind Raiders through the sky, Masters of the Universe is an unparalleled power fantasy, and every sequence in this movie should be dedicated to that feeling. Well, friends, I certainly appreciate your willingness to stick with me as I went over everything that I think it will take to make Masters the kind of success that Barbie has been in theaters. Just remember that the success of the Barbie movie can only be a good thing for a potential Masters of the Universe film, and perhaps bigger things are in store for this Masters movie than its humble beginnings as a Netflix original. Only time will tell, but I can only hope that those who are lucky enough to be a part of the production of this possible movie will keep all of these tenets in mind. And with that, I thank all of you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe because I post new Masters content all the time. And of course, like the video and comment down below about what you think it will take to make Motu successful at the movies. And if you would like to get a hold of me, feel free to drop me a line at our Twitter account at FanboysForever. As always, God bless you and yours. Good journey, and I'll see you on Fanboys Forever. Fanboy out.
Nobody takes pot shots at Lubitsch.